Welcome to the Right to Reason podcast. I'm your host, Robert Stanley. I'm talking with comedian Ron Placone. You might know him from the Jimmy Dore Show. He's starting his own live show. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to discuss the growing problems within the Democratic Party, how voting blue no matter who might not be what's best for you, and whether or not the resistance is really the assistance. You ready? Here we go.
Here we fucking go.
It's the Right to Reason podcast.
This episode of the Right to Reason podcast is brought to you by our patrons and contributors like me. We have all recognized the value of the unrestrained marketplace of ideas and have decided to make a difference. You can make a difference too. Contribute at patreon.com/right and learn more about your right to reason at therighttoreason.com. Your activism is appreciated.
Placone from the Jimmy Dore Show and from Get Your News On with Ron. Ron, I'm really happy to be talking to you, buddy.
What's up, man? Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
So there are so many topics that are of extreme importance going on in the world right now, and I wanted to ask you probably the most important one. What's this about DJ Khaled not eating pussy?
You're asking the wrong guy. I have no clue. I think that was in the story a while ago, wasn't it? Like that was.
It's still relevant, Ron. DJ Khaled is still relevant.
Is it? I mean, I don't know, man. I did a TMZ appearance one time, and I don't think it went. I actually don't know how it went, because I don't know if you've ever seen those things on TV.
It went horribly wrong.
Like,
you were a complete and utter disaster right off the bat.
Yeah, you might be right. I have no idea.
Worst interview I have ever seen in my life.
Well, it wasn't an interview, so I don't know if you actually saw it, but like you just speak about a topic for...
It might have been David Spade, and I just got you guys mixed up.
Okay.
God, take a clean. Just tourists are money. And I figure it's not what she sings.
One of the things I noticed from watching your show is that and this is something that I don't think a lot of my listeners may be aware of, because we're very tribalistic. We don't want to be labeled as a Trump supporter, and we don't want to destroy the blue wave, as it were. But the Democratic Party is actually pretty fucked up. And the concept of progressivism is to make things better. And I think we can actually make our
This
own.
is quite a shift, by the way. I got to give it to you. First, you start out with some like pop culture fluff that was relevant 2 months ago. And then you make like a David Spade reference, which I see it. You know, you're not the first. And then you talk about TMZ, and now you're like, let's talk about political corruption and the need for revolution. Like, this would be the most. It's like you're doing an impression of a morning zoo guy that wants to get fired. Like a guy that for for like 5 months he's been playing that role, and he's like, I can't do this hacky bullshit anymore, and I'm a lefty, and I gotta be true to myself. I can't do this anymore. So he just busts out with it, and then he's like, and by the way, I fucking quit. Like, he has his network moment. I'm allowed to cuss here, right?
You can fucking cuss all you want, man.
I wasn't sure. I didn't ask. I don't know. You could have been like, we're on 98.3 Iowa FM, and I would have been like, oh shit, I didn't realize.
It's a children's show.
Anyway, quite a transition.
All the kids want to know about DJ Khaled eating pussy.
Are people still talking about that? Seriously, I know we got to move on, but I'm genuinely curious, because I heard about that like, I want to say it was at least a month ago. I didn't care then, still don't.
It was like 2014.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, first of all, where people can find me, ronplacone.com is kind of the wheelhouse to find all my stuff. You can check Get Your News On with Ron every Monday through Thursday. I stream on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter over at Ron Placone on all 3 platforms. And the podcast actually comes out today. Later today, my podcast will be dropping the podcast version of Get Your News On with Ron, which is very new, by the way. The podcast, I've been doing it as a video streaming show, I guess, for about 5 or 6 months now, so it's still very. It's about as new as the DJ Khaled thing. That's how new my streaming show is.
So it's still relevant. That's what you're saying.
It's still relevant. The streaming show, the kids still want the streaming show, but the podcast is literally like a month old. So the podcast is like still very new. But I've been having fun with it. People wanted it. I like put a poll out and I was like, do you guys want a weekly podcast to kind of sum up the streams if you miss any of them? And most people said yes. So I was like, cool, I'm going to do it. So anyway, yeah, that's where you can find everything. Get Your News On with Ron. You can subscribe on iTunes for the podcast. Catch the stream on YouTube, youtube.com/Ron Placone. And yeah, so getting into our transition into revolution. You should call your show Pop Culture and Revolution.
Right.
And it's like, some people.
That's what it is.
Some people that just want the first part, they'll just tune out after. They'll be like, all right, it's getting heavy now. I got to bail.
I'm out. I'm like, can you comment to two things real quick? Kanye West and abortion. Go.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Kanye West and abortion,
so
did you hear his latest single? Did you hear his latest single? No, did you? Like, he just says poop for like 3 minutes. Oh, you didn't hear that? Oh, dude, you got to check that out. No, I'm not even kidding. Kidding. Kanye West's new single, he says poop for like 2 minutes. That's the entire song.
Oh my god!
It's like an old kind of
guy's a goddamn genius.
It's kind of weird, man. It was kind of
nobody thought of that one. He's like the Elon Musk of bad lyrics.
Well, you know what I think happened? I think he discovered the concept of scat singing, but then really misunderstood what it actually was. That's what I think happened.
You could be.
I could be wrong. But anyway.
Did he really do that?
No, that's a real song. I'm not joking about that song. Right. No.
We're going to... Yeah. Hold on. I'm going to find it real quick.
Knock yourself out, man. Yeah, go for it.
Realize, though.
Find it.
Here it is. I don't know. This actually sounds kind of dope.
What they don't really realize, though, this next verse, though, these bars... Watch this. Boopy scoop. Scoop dee dee whoop.
What the fuck?
Poop. Poop dee scoop dee. Scoop dee whoop. Whoopie dee scoop whoop poop. Poop dee dee whoop scoop. Poop.
And this is the motherfucker giving Trump advice. Seriously.
Whoop dee dee scoop. Whoop dee dee scoop poop.
That is nuts. That's fucking crazy.
Your mind's freaking blown. All right, so
what the fuck?
Getting on to an important topic before we lose everybody.
Nobody's listening anymore.
So the Democratic Party, over on the Jimmy Dore Show and on Get Your News On with Ron, we do critique the Democrats a lot. And we do face some flack for that at times because of a lot of the attitudes you mentioned to me off mic. Come on, Trump is so dangerous. You got to go blue no matter who. Now's not the time to focus on the imperfections of the Democratic Party, blah, blah, blah. I think that a lot of people that say that, they have the right intentions. Not all of them, but I think a lot of them do. I just think they're misdirected because something got us to Trump. It's not like everything was hunky-dory in the country and then Trump just appeared and disrupted the system. Trump's the result of a much longer-term problem. And I say that problem is neoliberalism infecting our country for the past 40 years. What do I mean by that when I say neoliberalism infecting our country for the past 40 years? Well, from about 1980-ish, some would argue even before that, 1970-ish, to present, we've had this trend of workers' rights going by the wayside. We've had this trend of both parties getting in bed with Wall Street, getting in bed with other corporations, and kind of serving those needs first before serving the needs of the people. We've entertained this fallacy that we can't have the types of programs other countries that are poorer than us take for granted, i.e. universal health care, i.e. tuition-free college. And we've been sold this idea that our individualism is worth it to put those things by the wayside. This is all nonsense because in reality, we have plenty of resources to do all these things. We just prefer to spend that money on bombs instead. And we prefer to have our monetary system benefit the most powerful and elite among us instead of everybody else. So when you have a system like that and you have two right-wing parties, I mean, that's something I really like to remind people of. The Democrats are a right-wing party. This idea that there's some progressive alternative to the Republicans, it's simply not true, unfortunately. Now, there are some progressives infiltrating the Democratic Party. There are some progressives that are registered as Democrats because they have no other option, and the Democrats are at least, socially more progressive than the Republicans. So, if you only have two choices and you want to run for office right now, well, the Democrats are your best shot at getting anywhere. So you have people Dem entering, and you have some progressives that were kind of the outliers that have been there for a long time. Someone like a Dennis Kucinich, who's a progressive, who has been working within the Democratic Party his entire career, and they've been screwing him over nonstop, including up to present. So, and a lot of us just sort of thought for a long time, and I include myself in this, that the Democrats were just sort of the clearer glass. They were sort of the more incremental way to get to the type of country we want to see. I've always identified as a pretty progressive guy. I never really fully identified with the Democratic Party ever since I've been awake politically. But for a long time, I thought they were the clearer glass to eventually get to the world I want. I voted for John Kerry in the first presidential election I was able to vote in. I voted for Barack Obama twice. This upcoming presidential, or this recent past presidential election, I voted for Jill Stein. 2016 really showed me that the Democrats aren't actually that clear glass, that they're actually against the type of things I want to see at the establishment level. Does that mean everybody registered as a Democrat is against those things? No, actually, most people that vote Democrat are for those things, but the people at the top don't want those things. The Democratic establishment is against single payer. They are pro-fracking. They are pro-corporations. They are pro-Wall Street. They are against tuition-free college. They are against living wages. These are all hard truths, but they're truth nonetheless. And if you look at the Democratic platform, it is empty of any actual policy ideas, and instead it just has empty verbiage saying all these nice flowery things in a more diplomatic way than the Republicans state them. Because the Republicans, they're for the 1% and they don't need to make any qualms about it. They don't need to pretend. The Democrats, they kind of need to pretend. They're just a more subtle version of the Republicans, and they're more okay on certain social issues. And even that, they go to that kicking and screaming. The Democrats were okay with gay marriage when public opinion supported it overwhelmingly. When the people demanded it and the Democratic establishment couldn't pretend anymore and they had to go over to it. Hillary Clinton wasn't cool with gay marriage until public opinion made her be okay with it. Because sometimes if you register as a Democrat, enough people need to entertain the idea that there actually is a choice. So at times these people need to throw us a bone occasionally. But that's exactly what it is. These people don't have, and when I say these people, I mean the establishment candidates, the corporatist candidates, their convictions can be bought and sold by the highest bidder. So until they have to actually throw us a bone because they need to make us think we have a choice, they're not going to. And that's what the Democratic Party is. So we're faced with two choices. We either got to hijack it and gut it completely, which seems like a next to impossible task, or we got to start a new party, which seems like a very, very hard task, but not impossible. So, we're faced with two pretty big mountains. Are they unsurmountable? No. But it's going to take time, and it's going to take effort, and it's going to take falling back and getting back up again. So this whole notion of blue no matter who, I think a lot of people, their heart's in the right place. It's just their head isn't. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is literally the definition of insanity, A. And B, blue no matter who doesn't hurt the other side. Blue no matter who enables the other side. Because blue no matter who gives you your Joe Manchins, your Joe Donnellys, your Claire McCaskells. Do you see what I'm getting at here? These are the people that roll over and play dead when it comes to Trump's Supreme Court nominees. These are the people that gave Trump more military money than he even asked for. These are the people that expanded his spying powers. This is not the resistance. This is the assistance.
Okay, let me ask you this, all right? Because in this next election, I will crawl through broken glass just to check somebody with a D next to their name because Trump is so devastating. But at the same time, I'm thinking this is a horrible strategy because they have no incentive to change right now. This is the same thing that happened with Barack Obama's second term.
Right.
The Republican Party looked at it and said, hey, look, all the money's coming in. What reason do we have to change? And they all kind of went rhino, and then the Tea Party people were inspired to get fucking crazy, right? And the Republicans said, we're just going to stay the same way. And then look what happened because of the Tea Party, this extreme change that happened in the Republican Party. And I feel like if we say blue no matter who, we're giving them no reason to change. I'm thinking this November, Democrats take the House, not the Senate. Trump is president again in 2020, but 2024, the Democrats start saying we better start taking some more progressive policies. You think there's a chance of that?
No, I don't. I don't think that. I mean, I think if we keep voting blue no matter who, the Democrats will never come around to we need to start accepting some progressive ideas, because I don't entertain the idea that the Democrats' first priority is winning. And again, that's something hard to swallow. But I really do think that. I think their first priority is making sure the donors are happy, which involves squashing any progressive movement. And then I think their priority afterwards is maybe beating a Republican or two. So when winning's not even your first priority, why would you go over to platforms that your donors don't want? It's just not going to happen. I think it's really good that people are Dem entering and are trying to hijack the party. I think that's a good thing. I'd rather see just a brand new party. I mean, I was at Convergence Conference, which was the Draft Bernie movement where we were trying to get Bernie Sanders to start a new party. He didn't do it. Why he didn't do it, I'm not quite sure. But he chose not to nonetheless, and his main priority is transforming the Democratic Party. I don't know why that's the way it ought to be. I mean, a lot of people, they make the argument of the structure's there, why not just take it over? But, Nick Brana, who runs Movement for a People's Party, he says this, and I think it's a good analogy. That's kind of like saying, hey, we're going to take over Walmart. And well, I mean,
right.
I don't think you're going to do that. I mean, that's just not, that's a nice sentiment, but I don't see it happening. It's a similar thing here. I mean, they have super delegates. They have just the DCCC in general and the people at the top running the DNC. If you completely got all these people out and completely changed the charter of the entire organization, could we see a much different party? Abso-freaking-lutely. But getting there is quite a feat. Now, if Bernie becomes president in 2020, that changes the game up a little bit. If a viable third party does come to the forefront, that changes the game up a little bit. What exactly is going to happen? It's hard to say for sure. I don't have the answer to that. But as far as if we keep voting blue no matter who, will the Democrats come around to progressive ideas? No, they won't. That's something I can pretty much guarantee. Now, I'm not trying to vote or shame anybody. If you're faced with an A or B dichotomy, Trump is awful, I don't blame you if you're going to vote for that Democrat. For me, and as far as 2020 goes, if the Democratic nominee is a good one, I would certainly vote for them. If they're not a good one, I will probably vote for the Green candidate. I live in California. I live in a safe state. I'd rather use my vote to help get us a better tomorrow than just vote for a Democrat that I don't want. So that's what I would do with my one vote. And as far as what we need to do, electoral politics isn't the only way to start making a better country for ourselves. I mean, there are all kinds of activist groups out there doing stuff about homelessness. I myself run a municipal internet task force here in Southern California. We're very new. We're just getting our bearings. But that's a really important cause to me because I think that without the internet, we'd really be screwed. Or without the free and open internet, I should specify, we'd really be screwed. So that's something I'm working on. There's people dedicated to the fight for 15, and you can really spread that on the local level. I do have a lot of frustrations and cynicism towards the Democratic Party and towards our electoral system as a whole at the top. I don't have those cynicisms at the smaller levels, the local and state levels. And there's still a lot to be said for changing things in your own backyard. So I would say, instead of focusing on the more dire situation of the electoral system at the top, we'll focus on building something from the ground up. I mean, that's what we got to do. That's what Bernie did. He had been doing the work for 30 plus years, and he did it as, guess what? Not a Democrat. So it's weird to hear the guy, and I like Bernie Sanders. I support Bernie Sanders. Some of his decisions I've disagreed with. A lot of them I have agreed with. But it's weird to see the guy that has crushed it in third-party politics for 30 plus years, almost 40 years, is currently arguably the most popular politician in the country. It's weird hearing him tell us that we can't sustain a viable new party. It's weird hearing that. It's like the equivalent of a professional musician who's like making a nice living, playing their music. They're getting it done. They're doing it on their own terms. And then you try to pick their brain and they tell you, hey, don't quit your day job. It's like, well, what are you
Right.
talking about? Clearly you can do this. You're doing it. Why? It's not impossible. You're doing it. Whenever somebody asks me, how'd you make a living as a comedian, I tell them, I don't say, don't quit your day job. It's tough. Yeah, it is tough. But you know what? It's not impossible. I did it. Tons of other people did it. Tons of other people are going to do it. And I know that analogy is a little basic, but I think there's some relevance here where it's like, Bernie, I don't understand. Why are you telling us this is a hard thing to do when you've been doing it? You're still doing it. Now's the time. And maybe he knows something I don't. I think he really wants to be president in 2020. I think he knows that's the best thing he can do for the movement as a whole. So I think that's why he's putting his chips there. So
He's definitely running.
I think so too.
I mean, what else is all this for?
I agree. I mean, I think that unless that's kind of the ace up his sleeve, I don't know why he's doing. I don't know why he's doing what he's doing. I don't know why. I mean, I can understand why he didn't go over to Convergence right away, just from sitting in his seat, because you don't want to come off as just, oh, it's sour grapes, and then from a marketing standpoint, the movement would just fizzle out. But some time had passed, and he had been slapped in the face by the establishment time and time again. So it wouldn't have been sour grapes. It would have been, okay, clearly we don't stand for the same things. So I need to have a vehicle that's actually going to represent these ideas. And you've made it clear to me it's not you guys.
How do you think Bernie would do against Trump in a debate?
Oh, come on, man. Is that a real question?
Yeah, actually, okay, hear me out.
All right.
You're thinking like an actual professional debate, and we've seen how Trump acts in these debates, where he bring up the size of his dick in the middle of a presidential debate. I mean, the guy's nuts. He's going to be way over the top this time because he's the incumbent. They will give him more leeway this time than they did even in 2016 because he's the president of the United States. They're going to let him get away with saying whatever the hell he wants just because they want another laugh track. I mean, in a professional setting, Bernie against anybody from the 2016 run, he would destroy him, just like he destroyed Hillary. Not a problem whatsoever. But Bernie up against Trump in 2020, that's different. He's going to outsmart him. He's going to out-policy him. He's going to out-idea him. But Trump's just going to make jokes. You would probably do well against Trump, because you're going to drop some small hand joke or something while he's talking. But that's what it's going to be. It's going to be a farce. And I'm worried that there's Bernie who's going to be talking about, hey, we need health care for the 99% of Americans. And then Trump's going to be like, you need health care, old man. You know what I mean? It's going to be crazy because he's just going to be dropping
I
jokes.
don't even think Trump would be that quick on his feet. And maybe you're right, because I would open with, Donald Trump's hands are so tiny, he's the only person that ever asked, is it in during foreplay? That's how I'd open. And by the way, a quick disclaimer, just so I'm totally transparent here. Yes, that is a joke you've heard on the Jimmy Dore Show before, but I wrote it, so I'm still allowed to use it. But anyway.
Yeah, well, it's your joke.
It is my joke.
Yeah, it's your joke.
It is my joke. Jimmy delivers it quite well. I wrote it for him. But anyway.
But basically, if I'm reading you right, all the funny things he says are from you. Is that right?
No. Putting you on the spot. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I do some of the writing for the show. Jimmy does a lot of the writing for the show. Mike McRae writes a lot for the show. Jim Earl writes a lot for the show. Frank Conniff writes a lot for the show. Steph Zamorano writes a lot for the show. Mark Van Landewit writes a lot for the show.
It's a good team. It's a really good team.
I am one writer. It's a really fun team, and I am just one member of it. But
and the miserable liberal.
Well, I said her. Yeah, I said Steph Zamorano.
Okay.
I didn't say her nickname. Yeah. I said her actual name. But yeah. So anyway, I just threw that disclaimer in there because I didn't want to be like, oh, Ron used that joke from the show. Like, yeah, but I wrote it.
It's your
so
joke.
I'm allowed to say it on a podcast. But anyway, I think Bernie would destroy Trump. I mean, you just said so yourself, like Bernie destroyed Hillary. I watched all three of those debates, and if somebody had to sit me down and say, name one thing Hillary Clinton did do right during her campaign, I would say she kicked his ass in all three debates. The debates were terrible. The debates were so insipid and so void of any policy talk or anything constructive whatsoever. The opening act might as well have been a guy getting kicked in the nuts. I mean, it was the dumbest. And presidential debates are typically bad, but this one, I thought, it was embarrassing. It was in any other country watching our presidential debates should have been just looking on in total horror. It was. I was embarrassed to be an American even watching them. You know what I mean? And
didn't she have all the questions in advance already?
Yeah, there was that. Yeah, that allegedly, like Donna Brazile gave them to her. I don't know if that was for the presidential or if that was for something else. I can't recall exactly. There was so much bullshit on the campaign trail.
It's impossible.
It's hard to keep track. Yeah. Oh, it totally is. It's hard to remember it all in sequential order. Objectively speaking, she did. I thought she really kicked his ass in all three debates. Now, that's like saying, yeah, she out-debated a 6-year-old. But, so, yeah, I think Bernie would destroy Trump in all three debates. Now, would that equal
intellectually
votes? Equal votes?
Intellectually, she beat him.
No, it does. Donald Trump, she set up traps for Donald Trump. He walked right into him. And again, this isn't so much like singing Hillary Clinton's praises because, I am very much opposed to the entire Clinton dynasty. I never voted for a Clinton. I never will. I think those debates don't even matter all that much. I think Bernie would definitely handle Trump. If Hillary Clinton did, who wouldn't? Even the only time Trump did really well on the debate stage was in the GOP debates, and that's because he knew he was going to get it. So eventually he was just debating them to the left because he was gearing up to look more moderate. Because he was gearing up for the general. So he wasn't even debating the other Republicans on the stage. He was debating whoever his Democratic opponent was going to be. And, with the GOP clown car, anybody can win in those debates. Jeb Bush, he couldn't even take a criticism without crying pretty much. He looked like he was going to cry at any moment.
Yeah.
That guy
he did.
is such a weak human. It's unbelievable. That's why he had the Bush legacy behind him and pretty much finished in last. That's beyond ridiculous.
You know what, I bet you that's what we're going to see in 2020. Just like there was a ton of Republicans on the stage, I bet we're going to see like a dozen Democrats up there.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's going to be... there's going to be a handful, yes. Is it going to be anything like the GOP clown car? I don't think so. I think you're going to have, I think they're prepping to shove either Cory Booker or Kamala Harris down our throats.
Yeah.
That's who I think they're prepping. And you've noticed they're saying a lot of nice things when it's politically convenient for them to say that. They're not taking corporate money right now. The one bright spot of all that is they know what the base wants. And what the base wants is a Bernie Sanders platform. Which, by the way, isn't a Bernie Sanders platform. Bernie Sanders did not invent progressive ideas. When people call us Bernie Bros or Bernie Wing or Bernie didn't invent any of these ideas. These are policies other countries take for granted. These are policies that even the right wing in other countries take for granted. In countries like Denmark and Finland and Sweden and Canada and England. So these are not new ideas. He just got them to a bigger platform, which is awesome that he did it. But, that's pretty much all. That's really all that really happened, which is a big thing. But that's all it is nonetheless. So this whole notion, like these people at the top, they know what the base wants. They got to figure out ways to make it seem like they're going to give it to them, but then not. That's why they're going to try to shove a Kamala Harris or a Cory Booker down our throats. I think in a perfect world, in a perfect world for them, they would go with Biden. But I feel like they're not going to be able to get away with that. Hey guys, Bernie Sanders is great, but he's too old and too white. Take our guy, Joe Biden. It's not going to work. People aren't that dumb.
That would totally destroy any chance of them trying to use that against Bernie later.
And it would guarantee us 8 years of Trump. I think that, there's a lot of, in the candidates I mentioned, the only one out of that crop, Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, the only one I would want to vote for is Bernie Sanders. And, just looking at it objectively, do I think that Cory Booker or Kamala Harris would have a shot at beating Trump? Yeah, I think they'd have a shot. Joe Biden, I don't think has a shot. If Joe Biden is the nominee, we got 8 years of Trump. That's a guarantee. If somebody else is the nominee, we might not have 8 years of Trump.
24 hours to go. I wanna be sedated. Nothing to do, nowhere to go. I wanna be sedated.
I wanted to tap into one thing you said. You said voter shaming, and I feel like that's something that seems to be very prevalent right now. Anytime Trump does something that's fucked up, Kavanaugh becomes Supreme Court justice, or he's caging kids, or what have you, a big theme that comes from the Democratic Party is, this is your fault. You caused this. And I wonder if you could talk to that for a little bit, because me personally, I feel like, well, I understand the sentiment. I think we go into that booth by ourselves for a reason. That's democracy. And I don't think it's a good strategy to try to shame people into voting the way that you want them to vote.
There's a couple things going on there. First of all, just on the most basic level, if you're going to blame the Green Party for various losses. The most recent one was in Ohio's 12th district. You're denying very basic arithmetic, because the truth is, in that district, if you would have given all the Green votes to the Democratic nominee still would have lost. In the 2016 election, you could have given all Jill Stein's votes to Hillary. Hillary still would have lost. You're denying not only basic math. The only way third parties really made a difference in the 2016 election and the third-party voters would have changed the outcome is if you're assuming every single third-party voter, that includes Gary Johnson voters, would have voted Democrat otherwise. That's a very faulty assumption to make. Gary Johnson voters would not have voted Democrat otherwise in most cases. They probably would have voted Trump.
Or not even voted at all.
Or not even voted.
That's one of those libertarian things that they don't.
Well, and that's the thing. To assume that every third-party voter would have voted the other way if their candidate wasn't on the ballot, or that the Democrats are entitled to those votes, or the Republicans are entitled to those votes, is so grossly arrogant. How arrogant is that to say, a lot of Green Party people, especially in Ohio, when they were saying, shame on you. Look, fracking happens in Ohio, and a lot of times the only anti-fracking candidates are Green Party voters or Green Party candidates. So a lot of these people that vote Green Party, they can't bring themselves to vote Democrat or Republican because they don't have an anti-fracking option. And a lot of Green Party voters are very well informed. They're paying attention. If the Democratic candidate really wanted their votes, they could show up to a meeting and they could say, look, I respect your convictions and I respect your candidates. But the truth is, I have the bigger machine behind me. But when it comes to the environment, I've got your back. I am anti-fracking. I have not accepted a dime of corporate money, and that certainly includes the fossil fuel industry. I'm behind you, but I got a chance to pull the W out here. So I'm asking you to get behind me this time. No one's stopping them from doing that. Meanwhile, no candidate does that. Also, using Ohio as another example, about 70% of the people in that district didn't show up to vote at all. Instead of shaming the people that showed up to vote, how about you try to appeal to the people that didn't vote? Try to appeal to the people that didn't really see an option on the ballot, so they didn't bother showing up to vote. Because that's what's really going on here. People, you talk to a lot of people in, I don't know what the right, proper term for it, underserved areas,
Poor.
Struggling areas, rural areas that don't have a lot of resources, where people are just struggling to get by, poor areas.
Right.
A lot of them, they don't vote because they're apathetic necessarily, or because they don't give a shit. They vote because they don't think it matters. Because under 8 years of Obama, their lives didn't get better. Under Clinton before that, their lives didn't get better. Under Bush, their lives certainly didn't get better. So they just don't show up anymore. Why not target those people and really promise them something you can deliver on? Promise them high living wages. Promise them changes at the local level. Promise them better resources in their community. Eliminate food deserts. These are all things you never hear a candidate talking about. Well, you do hear some progressives talking about. They usually just don't have the money to advance too far. Try to target those votes and those people instead of shaming the people that showed up. It's so tragically misdirected and arrogant and self-defeatist, quite frankly. Because, shaming Green Party voters is not going to win elections. It's just going to make you look stupid. Because you're shaming people with no money, with no power, and instead of looking at the corruption within the system that turns off voters in the first place.
I'm about to have a nervous breakdown. My head really hurts. If I don't find a way out of here, I'm gonna go berserk. I'm crazy and I'm hurt.
Ron, I have really enjoyed talking to you. But before I let you go, I wanted to ask you about this whole free speech problem that we've been having. Facebook's been taking lots of pages down. YouTube's shutting stuff off. In fact, the other day, Anonymous shut YouTube off for a couple hours, and everybody's freaking out, like, what are my kids going to do? They want to talk to me at the dinner table. I mean, what's his name? Alex Jones. He was kicked off everywhere. I think the only place he had left was, his own website and Pinterest. Was it? He's on Pinterest?
Yeah, I think Pinterest was part of it, which I had no idea. Yeah, that's the only place you can go.
But either way, this is obviously, I mean, they have the right to do whatever they want. They're a private company, but there's something about this that kind of worries me, because this is about more than just Alex Jones saying, hey, you're turning the frogs gay.
That's exactly right. It is bigger than that. And that's why, a lot of the things that I've said about it, I've had to put, look, I'm not. So here's the thing. And I felt this way before the Alex Jones things happened. So the fact that it happened to Alex Jones, who is somebody I don't like, I don't care for his content at all. But my thing is, when you are as big as Facebook, you should be regulated as a public utility because it benefits the greater good. What I mean by that is that free speech laws should be in place and enforced on social media platforms that big. Because they are so big, they are the modern day town square, they should have to abide by free speech laws. You shouldn't be able to censor somebody or take them down just by following your own terms of service. It's really odd seeing people defend Facebook's corporate personhood just because their corporate personhood affected somebody they don't like, i.e. Alex Jones. I still think that it benefits the greater good for them to be a public utility needing to follow free speech laws. Now, going on the Alex Jones, for instance, if Alex Jones violated free speech laws, which he may have, I'm not going to say whether he did or not for two reasons. One, I'm not totally fluent in the guy's catalog. Two, I'm not a constitutional lawyer. I'm just saying let the courts decide that. And if they did decide he violated free speech, he committed libel, he committed, an incite to violence, he, whatever it may be, if he would have been deplatformed because of that, because a court of law decided he violated free speech laws, I wouldn't have had any objection to that. I would have thought, well, that's the right thing. But that's not why he was deplatformed. He was deplatformed because he violated the terms of service via Facebook. Well, that's where you're treading on some very dangerous territory, because they've also done that to peace groups, to left-wing journalists. They flag Jimmy Dore Show videos, the show I'm on. So you're basically saying Silicon Valley gets to decide what is and isn't free speech. Well, that's not how the First Amendment works. And the law has not caught up to what I'm saying yet. There needs to be a because people, like you said yourself, well, they didn't really violate any law. You're right, they didn't. But the law can be wrong. And in this case, the law is wrong. Or maybe not even so much wrong as just it hasn't caught up yet. There needs to be some kind of mechanism in place that when a social media platform gets to the size of a Facebook or a Twitter, there is intervention and it becomes a public utility, because honoring the private corporatehood of Facebook goes against the greater good of free speech when they're that size. So I'm not implying that as soon as a social media platform is birthed on the internet, it needs to become a public utility and abide by free speech laws, and that needs to be enforced by some outside agency or the government. That's an unrealistic policy to enforce, nor is it necessary. MySpace.com does not need to be regulated as a public utility. I'm sure the 5 people there, it's not necessary.
MySpace.
But something like Facebook, that's a different story. So we need to have some kind of a mechanism in place to enforce that, so that these institutions are more transparent and that free speech laws are not violated, and that free speech is protected for the people posting on their platform. They're trying to have their cake and eat it too. They came to power by being just an open source platform. Now they're saying, well, we're not an open source platform. We get to determine what you can and can't see. And by the way, Facebook cooperates with the CIA. They cooperate with government. They have meetings. Government and CIA tells them, what pages they do and don't want to see. This is not a conspiracy. These are meetings that occur. It's all documented. It's in the news. I'm simply repeating what's in the news. It's not the stuff in the news we talk about, but it's in there. That's literally the definition of fascism. So this idea that if Facebook was forced to follow free speech laws, then that's a government takeover. No. We already have that going on. The corporations and the powers that be are already holding hands and cooperating. We already have that. What this would do is it would take the power away from Facebook to just censor you via their code of conduct, via their privacy clause, and it would involve our free speech laws and our free speech court. I think the free speech laws in the United States are pretty freaking good. Are they perfect? I'm sure they're not. Nothing is. But they're a hell of a lot better than anything I could come up with. And they're a hell of a lot better than anything Mark Zuckerberg could come up with. So I'd like to see social media platforms as big as Facebook be protected as public utilities, which protects our rights to free speech. And Facebook's corporate personhood, well, the greater good exceeds that of Facebook's corporate personhood in this case. And by the way, Mark Zuckerberg's still going to be rich as hell. You don't need to feel bad.
He'll be fine.
He'll be fine.
One of the things that you're touching on, though, is whenever you talk about government control or taking something away from the private industry or the free market, not leaving it up to the invisible hand, as it were, a lot of Americans start clutching pearls. They, whoa, what are you doing, pal? What are you doing? And it's actually quite reasonable And I understand why people get afraid. I understand because we've seen what the government does at the Gulf of Tonkin. We've seen what the government does at Kent State. We've seen what the government did even during the Obama administration with Fast and the Furious. Wasn't just a fucking movie. That shit really went down. Didn't include Vin Diesel. But I'm just saying, if you look at the banks, for instance, when they get this large and you say, hey, let's let the government try to split them up. Or you say, well, somebody has so much money, let's try to maybe put a price cap on things. They're $20 billion. What could that do in the system itself instead of just sitting in their bank somewhere, accruing interest for them so that they can pass it on to their kids, and everybody just keeps harboring money instead of it being in the market itself? And then same thing with a social media platform where you say this has now become a public utility because everybody's using it. And like you said, they'll be fine financially. In fact, having a price cap, having something where you say, hey, you're not going to be able to keep making all this money, that's not going to de-incentivize people. That's going to incentivize people to put their money back into the system because you're going to say, oh, I'm getting close to that 95% rate. I better be careful. Let me try to put some money out here, put it into charities, put it into some kind of public arena where
absolutely.
I don't get to that level.
We entertain this idea that we're all temporary embarrassed millionaires, you know. And when I say I don't mean you and but I mean kind of like that sort of an American notion. And there's a really good film I recommend if you've never watched it called The Power of Nightmares.
Oh, I'll check it out.
Where it really, I think BBC made it actually, but it's you can find it online though. Just Google Power of Nightmares, and I'm pretty sure I think the whole thing is available on YouTube actually. You can just straight up watch the whole thing for free. But yeah, it really outlines how we got to this point, how we got to this, you know, kind of predatory individualism mentality, which is where we've taken it to this point. Because, you know, the entrepreneurial spirit in a pure sense is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. You know, the garage inventor mentality that we have in this country helped us get to outer space first, you know. But when we had all that going on, we also had a strong working class. We also had a strong backbone. Workers had rights. They had unions. So we entertain this idea that without this disastrous form of capitalism, we can't have any type of enterprise. That's simply not true. And that's like a myth that I think, and that's why I think democratic socialism is using that terminology, because it's really resonating in contemporary America. Democratic socialism is basically saying, look, you can still have enterprise. It's just the workers get a say and they get a piece of the pie of what they produce. It's not authoritarian socialism, it's democratic socialism. And that's why I think they're catching on and they're building a big movement, because they're really starting to get the messaging right. And we got to get away from this idea that capitalism is good. Capitalism has had the same criticisms of it since its inception. You know why it's had the same criticisms? Because that's what it's set up to do. It's set up to have a huge divide between the rich and the poor, and it's set up to be inherently predatory. It's a dog-eat-dog model. It will inherently always become predatory, sometimes more than others, but that's inherently what it's meant to do. So this idea that you can't have enterprise without capitalism is false. And that's something we need to start migrating towards.
Ron Placone, thank you so much for talking to us today. Tell everybody where they can find you, buddy.
Thanks for having me, man. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
and
of course.
You can find me at ronplacone.com. You can subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Get Your News On with Ron. And of course, that's a podcast version of the live stream I do, which is Get Your News On with Ron on YouTube every Monday through Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's just over on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Ron Placone. It's the world's first viewer curated streaming news show. So what I mean by that is people send me the stuff they want to talk about, and that's how we build the show. It's not a prepared show in advance. I go onto the stream having no idea what the hell we're going to talk about. People can send me anything from a story about the NBA, which actually has never happened. I don't know why that was like the first, for instance, that popped in my head.
There.
But they could send me anything from something going on in Yemen to something goofy Trump said and everything in between. And I'm seeing it all for the first time. So it's a fun show. It's an interactive show. And and of course you can catch me over on the Jimmy Dore Show.
But most importantly, can they send you questions about DJ Khaled not eating pussy?
They could, and I'd be like, this is from like 6 months ago. How about you send me something a little more current?
Thank you to Ron. He was awesome. Thank you to Dave Blair at DaveFreeSong.com/free music. Thank you to our patron supporters, Enema Man, Gregoria, Left at the Valley Podcast, Larry Wilson, My Humble Assault, The Odd Atheist Friends, Patrick Walsh, and the sexiest motherfucker around, Phil Calderone. You can also support us at Patreon.com/right and learn more at therighttoreason.com. Next week, I have a very special treat for you. Your favorite YouTube creator and the funniest atheist you know, Brian Keith Dalton, better known as Mr. Deity, from the Mr. Deity Show, is going to be debating Martin Tanner from KSL Radio's Religion Today about Mormonism. Atheist versus Mormon. That's going to be awesome, and that's going to be next week. Between now and then, remember that you have the right to reason.
Name one thing Hillary Clinton did do right during her campaign, I would say she kicked his ass in all 3 debates. I'm
She's got a good ass on her, though. Can we at least give her that, Ron? Good ass.
Wow. Okay, but
come on, Ron. Nice ass.
Yeah, man. I mean, I don't even know how you can tell. She's always wearing the pantsuits and stuff, and she's
you can tell.
An older lady. But okay, man. Do you? But
I was desperate for some conversation.
Seems like you want to go there, and I think that's a good place to go.
My Hillary ass joke bombed a big one, didn't it? Joke
I just wasn't expecting it, man. I mean, I don't.
You do you.
And again, I don't, I didn't think it was, like it didn't offend me or anything. I mean, I'm a comedian.
As a
offend
proper
me,
feminist.
But I just kind of thought, I was like, where's that? Like, honestly, dude, I don't know how you can tell. Like I have no idea.
I'm like Ray.
How
I'm
you
Ray
can even
in
tell.
Ghostbusters. It just popped in there.
All right. I mean, she's not a bad-looking older woman, if you want to, but I just don't see how it's relevant.
What do you think her ass does look like, though? Just think about it. No, dwell on it.
I don't wonder about that.
Think about it.
I don't
think about it.
I don't care.
Think about it. Think about it.
I don't care. It's not my business.
This has been The Right to Reason, bitches.
Pretty cool bass line. Too bad there's nothing else. No.
Brent Lee, Unapologetics Podcast. Find him at Half Haggard on SoundCloud.